Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and this is our full review of the Asus ePad Transformer Prime, the first quad-core Tegra 3 Android tablet on the market. So this is the Asus ePad Transformer Prime. This is a second generation Android tablet from the company, and it's a lot faster and it's a lot thinner. Those are the big things about it, and it has an even brighter IPS display. But first we're going to take a look around. We've got the front video chat camera here, 1.3 megapixel, just slightly off-center. The ambient light sensor is to the left of it, but that's a perfectly fine location for it. And you can see how very thin it is. In fact, it's 0.32 or 0.33 inches, depending on how you convert your metrics to imperial measurements. Very thin. And that makes it just ever so slightly thinner than the iPad 2, the very thin Samsung Galaxy Tab 10.1, and the Motorola Zyboard 10.1. It's a dock connector down here, same style as used with the original Transformer. Two rubber plugs here, protecting holes that the dock fits into, the keyboard dock. We've got your 3.5mm headphone jack here, also works with headphone mic combos. There's your speaker grill here. Asus refers to this as a stereo speaker system, but I don't know about you, when I see one small grill and not too much sound coming out, I consider this to be effectively a mono speaker. Great stereo sound though out of the headphone jack. One thing to note with all the curves on this is that you see how much curve there is going on here? The back of your headphone jack may well be exposed, the metal part, so be careful you don't short that in metal and get a big wah in your ear. Likewise, we have the micro HDMI port right here, and there's a curve here, so if you have a micro HDMI cable with a kind of longer connector, it may stick out a bit and be prone to wobbling, which could loosen this jack. I'm not really thrilled about the design, to tell you the truth, because of the vulnerability of this, and even the dock connector here. You can see how the internal connector is kind of exposed a little bit there and prone perhaps to becoming wobbly later on. We don't have any problems at all with ours right now, but Asus in fact ships this with a rubber plug to protect it, which tells you that even they think it might be a little vulnerable. On the side here next to the micro HDMI port we have the small volume controls. This is the micro SD card slot. Microphone hole is here. Up here we have another microphone hole. And this is the teeny little power button, which is kind of hard to find and press when you want to, which can be good to avoid accidentally turning it on, though we did find if we picked it up by corners, that was the one time we did manage to hit that. The tablet weighs just 1.29 pounds, which makes it, again, just slightly lighter than the lightest tablets on the market in the 10-inch spectrum. And it has a nice metal back. It's a spun aluminum back. You can see a little bit of a swirly pattern. This is the amethyst gray. It does have a ever so slightly bluish, purplish tint, but it's pretty subtle. It looks very nice. It's also available in champagne gold. And the keyboard docks are available in both colors too, so you're going to match them up to suit whatever device you picked, whichever color. Your 8 megapixel camera on the back with autofocus, and in fact there's a continuous autofocus feature, mostly useful for video shooting, and your LED flash is back here. Now we've seen this spun look before, and that's because it's the close cousin to the Asus ZenBook UX31 and also the UX21. Those are Asus's first Ultrabooks, and you can see it has the same spun metal finish here. It's a little bit more pronounced because this is a lighter metal color, but they certainly go well together. One thing about the design, it's very beautiful. It's certainly as pretty as the iPad 2, but it's also as difficult to hold. Anything that's this skinny, a bit slippery with tapered edges is a little hard to hold onto, and though these edges are very well machined, in fact this is much more nicely put together than the original Transformer, which had some gaps and some creaks here and there, a plasticky back. This guy is perfectly machined. There are no literal sharp edges, but just the design of it means that this edge is going to poke into your palms when you're holding onto it. It's ergonomically not delightful. One last thing, given the fact that this is aluminum, it's metal, you think it wouldn't show fingerprints too much? Well, it does actually get pretty gunky. You can probably see some fingerprints on this already, and we've just wiped this down, so it does require some cleaning. And also the back is a little bit vulnerable to scratching. It doesn't mean that you can't put it down on your coffee table, which is a pretty friendly surface, but be careful of rough surfaces because this is somewhat scratchable. We've managed to put one or two very faint scratches on it already. In terms of overall footprint for width plus height, this has a fairly large footprint. It's bigger than the Zyboard 10.1, and it's about the same size as the Galaxy Tab 10.1, a little bit bigger. If you watched our unboxing and first look, you saw those comparisons, and we will be doing full smackdowns of those tablets later on too. In terms of performance, this is really the enthusiast tablet in a way, just like Asus motherboards are for enthusiasts. This guy is all about performance. It doesn't have some of the creature comforts or some of the other features you might find on other tablets. For example, there's no digital pen with active digitizer, there's no TV remote control, and some of those other added features we're seeing on other recent Android Honeycomb tablets. But what you do get is basic raw quad-core speed on this guy. And it's pretty neat that Asus is really accentuating that by giving you control not just over Super IPS mode versus regular display mode, but you see these icons right here. This is the power saving mode, this is the balanced mode, and this is the high performance mode. Now the difference in performance between balanced and high performance is pretty little in terms of synthetic benchmarks and experiential speed. We're talking about 5 to 10% difference at most in terms of performance. So the balanced mode actually does a very intelligent job of scaling up those cores as needed. Now if you put it in the low power mode, you indeed will save power. You might even get an extra hour of runtime out of it, but everything is noticeably slower. Even things like web browsing and synthetic benchmarks for Sun Spider JavaScript show that. So that's probably not a setting you want to use unless you're really, really worried about your battery power. So the Transformer Prime has a up to 1.4 gigahertz NVIDIA Tegra 3 quad-core CPU. I say up to because it does scaling depending on how many cores are running. The maximum 1.4 gigahertz is with one core running only. If it runs in balance mode, because this actually has power settings like your computer, then it's going to run the cores at 1.2 gigahertz. And in theory, it can run the cores up to 1.3 gigahertz if you've got multiple cores going. It also has a fifth companion core, and that's just a low power core to handle background tasks. You know, you've got to turn it off, but it's still checking your Gmail, it's checking for software updates, that kind of stuff. It's going to use that companion core that runs around 500 megahertz at the most to save you some power. And indeed, given the performance that's in this thing, it has pretty good battery life. We've been averaging around 8 hours on a charge just with the tablet, not with the companion keyboard dock, which has its own battery to extend runtimes. Let's talk about that keyboard dock for just a minute. It's a lot like the original Asus ePad Transformers dock, only it's thinner and it matches this visually. It's got the same nice metal swirl looking kind of finish to it. It has a full keyboard, it has a trackpad, it has one USB host port, one full-size USB port on it, and it has a secondary battery inside that can juice up this guy's battery, so basically it acts like a secondary battery pack for your Transformer Prime. That sells for $149. It is not included. So far I haven't seen any bundles for sale. In fact, the Transformer Prime, as of this video itself, is still very difficult to find, and the keyboard dock is even that much harder to find. The tablet has a gig of RAM, and it's available with either 32 or 64 gigs of storage. I don't think the 64 gigs are shipping yet. The 32 gig is $499, the 64 gig is $599. These are Wi-Fi only tablets, Wi-Fi 802.11 BGN. They have Bluetooth and they have a GPS, and we'll talk more about those features later. Obviously, we've got the dual cameras inside as well. And it's a full Android Honeycomb tablet. You have the Google Market and all that good stuff, so you can do whatever you want with it. The other big selling point for this, relatively speaking, budget-friendly tablet for what you get is the 10.1-inch IPS display. Now, the last Transformer had an IPS display, and it was pretty nice. It wasn't, wow, the best we've ever seen. This one definitely steps it up a notch, and it's what Asus likes to call their Super IPS Plus display. That's because it's very bright. And regular IPS mode is pretty bright, and you can see you have a quick shortcut right here, which we really like this handy. You can switch it over to Super IPS mode, which we're in right now, which Asus recommends for outdoor use only to combat outdoor bright light. And it does a fairly good job of that, though. I have to say that taking it outside with the Zyboard, which also has a very bright IPS display, I found the Zyboard a little bit clearer outside. But a lot of that probably has to do with reflections. This is a very big reflective piece of Corning Gorilla Glass. And Asus did try to get the glass closer to the LCD substructure so there's less refraction of light, but outdoor, really, glare is your big enemy. You can see the colors, you can see sharpness pretty well, but the glare is always going to be the thing you're fighting. In terms of synthetic benchmarks, the Transformer Prime does very well, but it doesn't do, oh my god, wow, like, say, Samsung's fastest Exynos CPUs do, and those are still just dual cores. But it's definitely a good step in the right direction and a step up. When we benchmark with Quadrant in normal mode, we got a 2929, which puts it certainly way ahead of the original Transformer Prime, but there are other tablets that score around that too. And when we put it in the high performance mode, we got a 3078 on Quadrant. LinPack, the average was 72. One thing to note that graphics benchmarks really don't change much between normal and high performance modes. In fact, they they don't change at all. So I would say that NVIDIA is not really scaling the GPU in those performance setting modes. LinPack was interesting though. It wasn't at all stable. We run our tests usually at least 30 times and we give you the average number that we got, but we saw it as low as 56, and at one point we got up to 115 in LinPack's multi-thread test. But again, the average and where most of the numbers fell really was right about 72. Antutu is really where it pulled ahead, and that benchmark is scored at 10,842, which is about twice as fast as most other tablets on the market. Even the Motorola Zyboard with its 1.2 GHz Ti OMAP CPU scored a 5718 in comparison, so well, it really does well, particularly on Antutu. In SunSpider, which benchmarks JavaScript performance, is scored 1814, which is puts it at the top of the pack. The Zyboard did a 1752. The Samsung Galaxy Tab 7 Plus, which is pushing fewer pixels around, scored a 1738, but that's significantly faster than the original Asus Transformer. For graphics testing with GL Benchmark, those of you who are familiar with that test know some of these subtests that we're talking about. The Egypt off-screen test, it did 57.6 FIPS. That's very good. The Zyboard did 28 in comparison. And the Samsung Galaxy Tab 7 Plus with its Exynos CPU did 32 FIPS. In the GL Benchmark Pro off-screen, it managed 70 FIPS. Again, very impressive, and that's the same whether you're running it in balanced or the high-performance mode. And the Motorola Zyboard scored 45 versus that 70.6. The Samsung Galaxy Tab 7 Plus, though, managed an even better 85 FIPS, so interesting there. And since this has a Tegra CPU, of course, that means it runs Tegra Zone games. That's NVIDIA's jaunt, and that's where they get behind some of the tablets that have those CPUs in there, and they optimize highly for it. And you'll see the difference in optimized games that are meant for Tegra 3. For example, they've tweaked Sprinkle and Riptide GP, which is a water racing game. In fact, you can see the difference there. The enhancements they added for the Tegra 3, you actually get splashed water on the camera screen, and you see more detail, more reflections on the water, and more turbulence in the water visually, which is kind of neat too. In terms of other games that really aren't as optimized, you get about the same experience, like Grand Theft Auto 3. It's going to be the same as it is on any Honeycomb tablet. And Shadowgun supposedly optimized for the multiple cores and threads that are available in the Tegra 3 CPU, though honestly we compared it to the iPad 2 and to the Zyboard and playing it in all three, and it really played about the same. Well, let's take a look at some of that stuff, and also a gallery too, because this is much better than the Tegra 2 for playing video. So when it comes to video playback performance, the NVIDIA Tegra 2 wasn't all that. It had problems with 1080p high profile, there was no hardware acceleration there. It wasn't the best, as it turns out, for that. Well, they remedied that with the Tegra 3, and boy, everything plays on this, and Asus and NVIDIA have thrown a lot of codecs at this too, so we've been able to play DivX and even MPEG-2, and our usual H.264 format MPEG files. Well, we've actually been able to play Blu-ray rips, so it's 1080p really high profile with 5.1 channel audio. We're going to take a look at one of those right now. We're going to use the standard Android player. You can hear the speaker, it's almost at max volume right now. It's not a very good speaker, but the headphones, boy, they have put some very good quality stereo. Now this same file, the Zyboard built-in video player said, sorry, I won't play that. Third-party players would play it, but the audio was a little weird because at a 5.1 channel it just doesn't understand it. This plays absolutely flawlessly, so that's pretty exciting stuff. Not so much because you're going to be playing this to the internal panel, but if you want to use that micro HDMI port out to your home theater stereo system or your TV or your monitor, that's where it really shines. But that's also where the complications come in. This guy seems to upsample everything to 5.1, even if it's not, but if it is 5.1, for example, our Sony AV receiver, a pretty late model, understands most devices we plug in fact all so far. This guy output 5.1 with a 5.1 clip like this, and we heard front left channel and subwoofer, lots of subwoofer, but none of the other channels actually came through. And we tried with a couple of different cables, not a cable issue, all 1.4 HDMI, just like the device. In fact, Ethernet over HDMI capable cables. So a little confusion there. If you have a 5.1 clip and you plug it into, say, just directly into your TV via HDMI cable, and your TV would have just 2 speakers, not 5.1 generally built in, you'll get audio only on the left channel in our tests. Now there is no software control for that, unfortunately. It would be nice if they gave us some control over what it was trying to do with audio output. And you can kind of fool it. You can plug in some headphones, for example, and try to get it to jump back into stereo mode. But otherwise, if you take a look at sound settings here, there's really not a whole lot going on. You don't get control over that, nor do you under the Asus customized setting here, which gives you neat things like enabling Super IPS screenshot system performance and the quick settings and that kind of thing. So it was a challenge. We plugged in other tablets like the Galaxy Tab 10 and the Zyboard. They would just output straight stereo, no upsampling to 5.1. It was funny, we even plugged this into our receiver and we just tried playing some Google Music, some tracks, and it was upsampling those to 5.1 as well. Clearly this is something that could be remedied with the software update, and we hope that Asus does to make this more compatible with home theater components. Now for those of you who are enthusiasts, and I think you are the target folks for this fairly high-performance tablet that's pretty cutting edge, you've heard that there's some GPS problems, and at first we thought things were looking okay. You look at Google Maps, that's because it relies on Wi-Fi access point information. Google has a humongous database of Wi-Fi access points across the country, and in fact across the world, so they can tell where you are just relative to what Wi-Fi access points are nearby. If you're not relying on that, if you turn off Wi-Fi, or even if you leave it on but you go away from, say, populous areas where there are going to be a lot of access points, you notice right away GPS is having problems. Or once you turn on navigation, which actually uses satellites, indoors, we could not possibly get a fix. And you can see we've used a lot of tests here. We have GPS tests installed, we have GPS status, and we've used MyTrax to actually track routes as we've driven around. I'll take a look at that right now just to show you a point. Now you can see here I was driving rather legally and rather soberly, yet it thinks that I was cutting through a whole lot of backyards to get to the local supermarket. I wasn't. In fact, as I tried to take a 2.5-mile drive to the local supermarket, took the device outside, and in about a minute and a half it got a fix. Clear sky, beautiful clear sky we've been having lately, sunny day, so no problems there, low buildings, nothing else, suburban area. So certainly a clear sight of the sky. It took about a minute and a half to get a fix outdoors. Set it in the car right underneath the open moonroof, so it still had some clear sky view, and at about 3/4 of a mile it lost the GPS signal. Then it found it again, then it lost it again. If you're looking to use this in your RV or for your trips across America or wherever you may be going, right now this is not looking like the best choice. The GPS on this is not very strong. Now I don't know if that's a hardware or a software issue. I'm guessing it may be a hardware issue given the metal back here, maybe causing some attenuation. They use a nice Broadcom chip in this for GPS, so it should do well. But it's always a challenge in Wi-Fi only tablets. The ones that do the best, for those of you who are really seriously needing this for outdoor navigation or traveling around, really should consider ones with integrated 3G or 4G, because you've got that cell tower triangulation speeding things up, and I've always seen much better performance with those relative to the Wi-Fi only models. That said, the Galaxy Tab 10.1 Wi-Fi only tablet that we have, that guy actually could get a fix indoors in under a minute and works fine outdoors. And last thing I want to note is that with Wi-Fi on or off, really the GPS was equally as challenged. So I don't think, I know Asus is saying that it's better if you have Wi-Fi on. We left Wi-Fi on, it really didn't seem to cheer it up too much. In terms of Wi-Fi performance, that had been another issue that supposedly delayed the release of this tablet. Wi-Fi has been good for us. It's not the strongest among all of our tablets, but it certainly has reasonably good range and reception. If we're in the same room with the access point, we do get a full signal, for example. Not quite as strong as some tablets, so if you're in a Wi-Fi challenged area, keep that in mind. Again, that may be one of the problems with having an all-metal back. It does tend to block signals. So how about web browsing? Since this is Honeycomb, we have Adobe Flash in here. We're going to take a look at how quickly pages load. We have a reasonably good Wi-Fi signal right now. We'll visit our own website, full site, not a mobile site, so you can see the speed at which it loads. This is over a Wi-Fi 802.11 network. It's actually an Apple Airport Extreme network. Seems to be perfectly compatible with that. A little delay while it loads some of the Flash ads, but pretty good speed. Not too much of that blockiness you sometimes see in Android's WebKit web browser. This is reasonably fluid as well. And we'll take a look at an Adobe Flash video and see how that plays. A little bit jerkiness while the page is loading, but that's forgivable. So we'll play our Zyboard 8.2 video review. Pop it out to full screen 480p mode. Nice sharp display, by the way. The glare and reflections can be a bit annoying, but the IPS display has very wide viewing angles. This is a kind of unique size. We're going to take a look at it now. So this is the Motorola Zyboard 8.2. This is available playing perfectly on Verizon Wireless. It's not available as a Wi-Fi. And again, really sharp display, 178-degree viewing angles. Glare an issue, but other than that, looking good. Now let's look at gaming, because you're probably into gaming if you're interested in this tablet. And we're going to take a look at Riptide Gp. This is the latest version that's optimized for Tegra 3, and you're going to see more water reflections if you play this game. So here at the beginning you can see we actually have more water effects than you do if you're not playing this on a Tegra 3. And then there's a whole lot of water detail going on. Obviously plays very smoothly. And there are those water reflections, or water spots on the screen. Something you only get with the Tegra 3 right now. And now we're going to test out Shadowgun, one of the most visually pleasing games currently available on the Android market.
John, are you there?
Yeah, I am. The module's destroyed. You picking
Cutscene
anything
plays
up on
just
your
fine.
scanners yet?
I still cannot initiate scanning sequence.
Plays beautifully. In terms of UI customization, just with the Transformer Asus leaves things pretty much alone. You've got your standard Android honeycomb interface with your multiple desktops here. A couple of custom widgets. There, My Zine, which gives you quick access to web pages you visited recently, your photos over here, and updates on your email, events, and stuff like that. You've got their My Cloud, which is basically DLNA access and web storage. And you've got their ebook reader. And here's the sample ebook. Not my favorite ebook reader, but you know, you can download anything you want. Nook, Kindle, Aldeco, all sorts of stuff like that. Pretty basic stuff right here, facing pages view right now because we're in landscape mode. And we've got Asus's web storage over here, which they like to do with all their e-products, including their netbooks. And that's mostly what you've got here. Again, what we like is the fact that they've added various video codecs. In terms of video codecs, this does support DivX. We're playing DivX right now using the built-in player, not a third-party player. The one thing I will say, though, is sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. It seems like a couple more bug fixes are in order there. Sometimes it actually just freezes the player trying, but if you give it a reboot, it will play the DivX file. If you want to play other formats like MPEG-2, that kind of thing, just download a player like BS Player Lite or some of the others on the market and it can do that just fine. And here's your absolutely humongous tablet-style viewfinder right here, and you can see you've got access to quick settings and stuff like that, your white balance, whether the flash is on or off. Whole lot of settings here. Focus mode right now is on auto. You can choose infinity. Continuous autofocus, you can see it shook in the background a little bit while it was focusing. Aspect ratio, picture size, all that kind of stuff. And here you can switch back and forth between camera and video. And this is your movable focus box. And it beeps and turns green when it's focusing. Now, we'll take a picture right here. Fast enough once it's focused. One thing I'll say is I don't know if it's something wrong with the camera software, or I don't think it's our camera module, because often we get very fuzzy shots and a whole lot of white balance issues outdoors where whites are very overexposed, but then about every fifth shot or so we get a really sharp shot. So again, I don't know if there's a QC issue and there's something wrong with our particular camera or what, but when it takes a sharp shot, they're pretty pleasing. I can see over sharpening certainly in the camera software, but and that colors are pretty good. Definitely a blue to cyan bias, a little cool on the color side, but not bad. And it can shoot 1080p, and that's where the continuous autofocus is handy, because you know, as you move around, often your video camera just doesn't really stay in focus very well. This will continually autofocus at reasonably good speed. You can see it working on it just as I'm moving this, and this is fairly close. And it does a pretty good job, but we noticed the same thing with the video camera too. It was kind of hit or miss. Sometimes it would be in focus and sharp, other times it would be kind of grainy and not so in focus. In terms of additional multimedia, like all Honeycomb tablets, this has Netflix, and yes, it works just fine. Hulu Plus, there isn't a client yet for the Prime. Hopefully there will be in the future, and it has the very capable YouTube player that Google makes. Good stuff too. So that's the Asus ePad Transformer Prime, your high-performance tablet for the, really I'd call it the beginning of 2012, because very few of us have found one in stores at the end of 2011. Now, this is a retail version, by the way. This is not a review unit, so this has not been doctored in any way to look better or anything like that or perform any better. The quad-core CPU is certainly compelling. I mean, that's a very familiar concept now, because pretty much every computer you buy, notebook or desktop, is going to be quad-core or maybe even higher. The thing is that Honeycomb and the applications, they don't make necessarily a whole lot of use of that many cores and threads right now, and hopefully in the future they will. So this kind of reminds me of the discussion years ago when we had our first dual-core CPUs. There was an obvious performance gain, just as there was with Android products, but when you went up to 4 cores, people are like, well, do I want a fast dual-core or a slower quad-core? And right now, as you can see from the benchmarks and things like that, a quad-core isn't going to exactly blow the doors off of every other very recent tablet on the market, but it is more future-proof. Of course, by the time that Android OS and all the applications start to make use of all those cores, there probably is going to be something like the Prime 3 on the market, or something like that. It's hard to say. In terms of other tablets that are coming up to compete with this, it seems like a lot of them are going to have that 1.2 gigahertz dual-core TI CPU. I know several manufacturers are planning on releasing those. Motorola already has done that with the Xi board, and that's very ice cream sandwich friendly, and the performance is pretty good there, but in terms of graphics performance, definitely the Transformer Prime is showing those up. We probably will see a few Tegra 3. We hope to see more, because that's really going to speed the adoption of applications that are optimized for the Tegra 3. I know there are rumors out there that Acer is going to have a Tegra 3 sometime in March. Right now it's been leaked from Russia with love, and that one actually has a full 1080p display built in. Now again, that is just a rumor. Lenovo is going to be releasing a Tegra 3 probably in China, one of their Lipad tablets. So it'll be interesting to see what happens and how many more Tegra 3 tablets are on the market. But as the first one available, this has a lot to offer for $499. You get a really stunning, very bright IPS plus display that can combat outdoor light. Fortunately, the glare is still there, still an issue, but still very sharp, very high contrast, one of the highest contrast mobile displays on the market. Excellent wide viewing angles. You get that gig of RAM, you get 32 gigs of storage at a minimum, which is nice. There's still tablets out there like the Xi boards with just 16 gigs of storage, and even the base Samsung Galaxy Tab 10.1. And you get dual cameras and your promised upgrade to Ice Cream Sandwich, hopefully pretty soon. So this is a tablet I would definitely recommend for you enthusiasts who want the fastest, who are going to really push the limits of video with this guy and play a lot of games, particularly 3D demanding games. But Asus definitely has some work to do here. The problems that we've had with 5.1 channel audio not translating well to dual channel HDMI components, or even to AV receivers that can support up to 7.1 channels in the case of our Sony receiver. And the stability is pretty good on this, but we have managed to crash it several times. Especially DivX seems to sometimes baffle it and crash it, sometimes it doesn't. If you're doing things like multitasking, definitely the quad-core CPU helps us a lot. processing power going on behind this, but sometimes we have some stability issues. Again, I'm sure those things are going to be fixed in firmware updates, and some of them will be improved with Ice Cream Sandwich. In terms of other features, this one really doesn't push the envelope so much. As we mentioned, you don't get TV remote control, you don't get pen input, you don't get some of those other neat new features. In fact, this does not even have USB host unless you buy the $149 keyboard dock. That one adds the full-size USB port, but there isn't even a USB port on this. It just has that proprietary dock connector at the bottom, just like the original transformer. So if you're looking for USB host, you are going to need that secondary component, the keyboard dock, to get USB host, which is great if you want to type. Again, that's another thing that sets this guy apart, is the integration that's offered with the keyboard dock. It looks just like an ultralight notebook, 11.6-inch or 10-inch form factor notebook with a keyboard dock that folds shut just like a notebook, protects the screen, and has a pretty reasonably decent chiclet keyboard on it, and an okay trackpad too. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Visit our website for the full review, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And yes, we'll be doing smackdowns with this and a couple of other competing tablets as well.